Thank you all. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Please keep your seats. Yeah, so nice of you.
Transplanted Houstonian.
Right on. Go Stros. Yeah. Thank you all for being here. That's so nice. And Natalie, thank you for the introduction, getting us started. Very grateful to be here again. We have not been in Las Vegas since the beginning of August. In fact, I was here in your community when I found out about the shooting in my community. And news that perhaps you felt the same way 2 years ago on October 1st. But on August 3rd of this year, when the first text came in from friends and family members, there's been this shooting. At first we thought it was at Cielo Vista Mall. Then we learned it was at the Walmart just near the mall. No way. Not in El Paso, not in our community. There's got to be some mistake. Folks are exaggerating. This doesn't happen in El Paso. We're this beautiful, safe community where we feel very secure. In fact, we're really proud of who we are and how safe we are and how our safety is connected to the fact that we're a city of immigrants and the sons and daughters of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees. Their presence, the fact that they chose this country, made their home in America, has made us stronger and more successful and safer, I would tell everybody in the country, than we otherwise would have been. And so when this news came in and I was reading the first reports, I couldn't believe it. And even as those reports were confirmed, and I reached out to the El Paso County Sheriff and the mayor of El Paso to say, is what I'm reading what is really happening on the ground? And they told me, yes, Beto, I'm sorry. That's in fact what's happening here. It's hard for us to believe as well. I could not fully absorb it or comprehend it or accept it. Even now talking about it, 22 people killed in under 3 minutes, many dozens more injured in the most grievous ways. I just spent part of last night with a family. The wife shot in both legs, survived her injuries, is now walking again without the aid of a wheelchair or a walker, which is just beautiful to see her progress over the last couple of months. Her husband shot a couple of times, but one round in particular entered his abdomen, his gallbladder, his spleen, both of his kidneys, his liver, his intestine in 3 separate places. He's had 21 surgeries so far as they try to stitch him inside back together after his insides were destroyed. And those trauma surgeons and those nurses and the custodial staff and everyone who works at Del Sol Hospital doing everything they can for this guy in this community, El Paso, Texas. And really, those of you in Las Vegas who've sent your support and your love and your strength, just know that it is gratefully received by the Garcia family and other families who have gone through this. And yet, it is tough for him to breathe. It is tough for him to eat. It's tough for his body to absorb anything when your intestine is no longer really functionally there anymore. I remember being on the flight back from Las Vegas to El Paso, and we canceled all of our events in Nevada and anything else we were going to do in the campaign. And frankly, I could have just cared less about the campaign or anything else. I wanted to be at home. I wanted to be with my kids. I wanted to be with my family. I wanted to be with my community. And this young man approaches me and he says, I bet you're going to El Paso right now for the same reason I am. And I said, yes, but tell me your story. What's going on? He'd found out that his mom had been shot in the chest, and that's all he knew. Imagine if somebody had dropped that on you at work. And he did what probably any of us would have done. He asked his boss for help, booked a ticket, got on that flight back to El Paso, and was headed straight to his mom's room in the intensive care unit at University Medical Center. And on the flight, he said, is there any chance you would want to join me when I go to see my mom? And I said, well, are you sure that she wants to see me? She probably just wants to see you. I don't know what I add to this. And he said, no, she's a fan. She's followed you. I think that would bring her some comfort if you went. And I want you to be able to see this as well. And so I followed him. We went to University Medical Center, walked into his mom's ICU, and she's got, a mask over her face to help her breathe, oxygen being fed in. She has tubes that, you can't see her because she's covered in a sheet, but the tubes are running out from under the sheet carrying all kinds of fluids. She had been shot in both of her lungs, had been perforated. So she's breathing through machines there. She's awake, she's conscious, and she sees Chris, her son, with whom we've traveled to the ICU, and her face just breaks out in the most beautiful, the most profound smile. Mother seeing her child, her son, who has rushed to her bedside to be with her in her moment of need. Her daughters are both there. They live in El Paso. They're both school teachers or educators. And then there's this guy, Beto, who's walking in. And you know what her instinct was, and this says something to the grace of this family, and really to people, and maybe El Paso. She wanted to make me feel comfortable. She knew I was a stranger in that room and knew that I might have felt out of place, and welcomed me, talked with me a little bit, although I could tell it was really difficult for her to do. And of course we left, to give that family time to be together. But it struck me how courageous, how strong she was, her family was, people are when they're faced with this kind of tragedy. And I asked her, where do you get this strength? Well, the next day, I went to another hospital where I met her mother, who's 81 years old, who was also shot. And I saw that that's where she gets her strength. Her mom said, "Hey, Beto, I remember you from your campaign for Congress in 2012. You knocked on my door, and I told you you're never going to get my vote. And I gave you a hard time, but she said it made an impact on me that you knocked on my door and that you showed up. And I remember the conversation we had, and I remember telling you I was going to vote for Sylvester Reyes, not for you. But as soon as you won that election in 2012 and you were my member of Congress, I was proud that I had met you and that I knew you and I had that connection. And I loved that as I'm walking into her hospital room, she's busting my chops and trying to make me smile and laugh at myself, which I did. And just really amazing. And the story I heard about her, 81 years old, her daughter's been shot, her sister was shot as well, was that she was helping others at that Walmart in El Paso before she realized that she was injured, or maybe she knew she was all along, but maybe before she succumbed to her injuries and had to step back and lay on the ground and be carried off and taken to the hospital. I just wanted to share that with you because not only do we have that connection, I was here, we have that connection, as my friend Rhonda says, the shittiest club in the world, that our communities witnessed and suffered and overcame these massacres, these acts of terror, gun violence, and really have a story to tell to one another and to the rest of the country that we don't have to accept this. This is not our lot, our future, our fate. This doesn't just have to happen. This isn't an act of nature. This isn't the judgment of God. This isn't who we are. We're not inherently evil or dangerous or violent or bad people. We just have failed so far to find the political will to do the right thing, although the answers, I think, are pretty obvious. If you had universal background checks, if you had red flag laws, if you closed all the loopholes, if you stopped selling the AK-47, which was the weapon that was used in El Paso, if you no longer allowed people to purchase an AR-15, and then understanding that there's 10 million of these weapons that were originally designed, engineered, and sold to the militaries of the world because they are so good at killing people so effectively, so efficiently, in such great numbers, that they should never be in our homes. And so we're gonna buy them back, and we're gonna put the lives of our families, our kids, our fellow human beings over your right to own an AR-15. Now, to be clear, because some people will try to confuse the issue or conflate different kinds of guns, I'm specifically talking about weapons designed for war. Your shotgun, your hunting rifle, your handgun that you have at home, maybe for self-defense or protection or for whatever reason, it's really none of my business. That's yours to keep as long as you've gone through a background check, as long as we hold the right to take that firearm from you if you pose a danger to yourself. 22,000 people in this country every single year kill themselves with a gun. in this country. If you're showing signs that you're going to harm yourself, those red flag laws that I'm talking about, they allow us to help you and to protect you. If you're going to harm me or my family or someone at your school or your place of work, we're going to make sure that we reserve the right to protect everyone there as well. These are things that we know that we can do that will save lives. And if ever it was necessary, it's now, given what we know in Las Vegas and in El Paso. And if ever, this is my belief, and there's some facts to support this, but most of this is just feeling. If ever there were a moment that this was possible, I think it is right now. I left a forum earlier today hosted by Gabby Giffords and her organization and March for Our Lives. These really amazing students and young people, some of whom attended Marjory Stoneman Douglas in Parkland, Florida, the scene of another horrific mass shooting and act of terror in this country with a weapon of war. But really young people all over this country, including some in El Paso, some here in Las Vegas. And they not only organized this forum that all these presidential candidates came to speak at and to be questioned, to be held accountable before they have the option of holding this position of public trust. They also, March for Our Lives, proposed a peace plan for America that has as its tenets many of the things that are already talked about, including mandatory licensing and gun registration, and then, y además, and super important, in those communities that don't make the headlines, that aren't on the evening news, where we don't know the names of all the victims, not as sensational, not as much a part of all of our lives as they should be, in communities where these kinds of deaths and murders are so numbingly common, we don't even know that they're happening anymore. Kids who are nameless, people who frankly and functionally are faceless in this country, so often communities of color, so often lower income communities. Too often, communities who face a fear for those who can legally hold and use a firearm, members of law enforcement, who far too often have used them against people who have no weapon on them, who very often and unfortunately predictably in this country right now come from those communities of color. This peace plan talks about investing in those communities and preventing violence before it ever takes place and holding everyone who's responsible accountable, including those members of law enforcement who abuse the power that they have been given, ensuring that there is justice at the end of the day so that no American has to fear anyone who's sworn to serve and protect all of us. The fact that they've introduced that plan and they've shifted the conversation in this country in the center of gravity when it comes to guns in America makes me so proud of them, of this country, so optimistic and so hopeful. And it reminds me that at any time of decisive action in this country's history, whenever we were up against a very challenging, maybe seemingly intractable problem, it has always been young people who have led the way. If I think about World War II, FDR in the White House, talking about the day that will live in infamy and calling this country to war. He was our leader, but those who fought the battles, who sacrificed themselves and lost their lives, they were 17 years old, 18 years old, 19 years old. I think about Greensboro, North Carolina, February 1, 1964, African-American students from North Carolina A&T walk into the Woolworths, order a cup of coffee, are refused because of the color of their skin, show up the next day, the day after, every single day going forward until through force of will and the courage of their convictions, they integrate that lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, and spark a revolution in this country that found a home in Birmingham, Alabama 2 years later, the Children's Crusade, the first day of which kids, my kids' age, your kids' age, 8, 10, 12 years old, leaving their classrooms, marching down the streets of downtown Birmingham, Alabama, against fire hoses that were trained against them, that peeled the bark off the trees in between the sidewalk and the street and tore the clothes off their backs. There's this iconic photo of 3 kids being pinned down under this blast of water, and the caption to it says, "They're fighting a fire that will never go out." Those kids, those young people changed the conversation on civil rights, on treating men and women, like the full U.S. citizens that they were. And though LBJ, my fellow Texan, gets the credit for signing into law the Civil Rights Act in 1964 and the Voting Rights Act in 1965, it was those young people who forced it to happen. Kent State, May 4th, 1970, 4 students are shot as they protest the United States involvement in Vietnam and the fact that we had just invaded Cambodia as well. Many others shot and survived their wounds. I met one of them, this man named Alan Canfora, who's just as fired up as he was 50 years ago. When we're there at Kent State, in addition to understanding that history, 1,000 students came out when we were there. 1,000 students standing up to be counted for themselves, for this country, for our future, on issues of climate, and immigration, and endemic racism, and everything that matters, including gun violence, and doing this in the face of people who showed up at that meeting armed with AR-15s, literally, at a town hall just like this one. And I don't know if anyone's got an AR-15 on them here, but the goal was to intimidate by bringing a weapon of war. How can I have a conversation on the level with you if you're armed with something that can take my life and the life of everyone in this room? We just really can't. And yet not a single one of those students was cowed or bowed or made afraid or did anything other than maintaining the courage of their convictions. So, this is why I have hope at this moment, that on the issue of gun violence, on any issue that you care about, the young people here in this country are going to continue to inspire and guide us. They're going to be in my face, and they're going to force me to account for myself and what it is I want to do for this country. To see things clearly, to speak honestly, and to act decisively. That is our charge. That is our opportunity. And when I think about the young people in my life, my son Ulysses is 12. My daughter Molly is 11. My son Henry is 8. He'll be 9 in 3 weeks. I fear their judgment more than I fear anything else. What they're going to say and think about me 30 years from now. Dad, you knew all this stuff was going on. You knew that we lost 40,000 people a year. What did you do? I want to be able to tell them we passed that peace plan that I just talked about. Dad, you knew that we only had 10 years left to confront climate change before it was too late. Las Vegas, Nevada is warming faster than any other city in the United States of America. Second fastest warming city, El Paso, Texas. Another connection that I do not want to have with you, but we do. Henry, my 8-year-old, soon to be 9, I remember called us and said, Dad, if we win, we get to stay in El Paso, right? And I said, no, if we win, we're going to move to Washington, D.C. We're going to be president of the United States. And he said, no, you told me that if we don't confront climate change, if we don't get off fossil fuel, if we don't embrace renewable wind and solar energy technology, if we don't cap greenhouse gas emissions, if we don't get to net zero by 2050 or sooner, then we won't be able to live in this, it won't support human life anymore down the road. And I was like, I get it. You're right. I want him to know in the year 2050, which is the backstop for getting to net zero greenhouse gas emissions, when he will be not even my age yet, I want him to look back on me, on all of us, with pride and say, look, this was a really tall order for you all. You guys had not done jack on climate change for the last 40 years, though the science and the facts and the truth was out there. And you all mustered the courage, the political will, you got after it, and you got it done. On immigration, the fact here in Las Vegas and in El Paso, in Texas and Nevada, you have hundreds of thousands of people who live in fear every single day of their lives. Children who think that my dad, who just dropped me off at school, may not be picking me up because he may be picked up himself, detained and deported back to a country that child has never been to. Dreamers who are just trying to get ahead and do right by themselves and their families and all of us, who may be sent to a place whose language they do not speak, where they no longer have family. They want to know that we did the right thing, that we didn't compromise our values with more walls or more cages, or show how tough we are on those immigrants by deporting hundreds of thousands of them, as this administration is doing, as the last administration did. That we are unapologetically, without ever having to be defensive about who we are, Using the example of Las Vegas and El Paso to show the rest of the country who we can become, we rewrite this country's immigration laws in our own image, free those dreamers from any fear of deportation by making them U.S. citizens in this, their true home country. Their parents, their siblings, others working the toughest jobs in America right now, given status, put on a path to citizenship to be able to contribute even more, aún más, al éxito de este país. That's the opportunity that we have right now. I want my kids to look back and say, there are kids here, so I'm not going to use the four-letter word I want them to use, but you know the word I'm thinking of. Blank yes, Dad. We're going forward at these town halls, Cynthia, we can get every person under 18 years old or their parent to sign a consent form allowing me to cuss in front of them, because it just doesn't have so this is the opportunity to not be afraid in the face of fear that they want us to feel, right? President Trump, if you're a Muslim, you're dangerous. According to him, we're going to ban all Muslims from this country. He wants you to be afraid of the other, who does not pray like the way the majority of this country prays. If you're an immigrant, you're a killer. You're a predator. You're an invasion. You're an infestation. You're an animal. Those are all phrases he has used to describe people who commit crimes at a far lower rate than anyone who is born in this country. Asking 4 women of color, duly elected by their constituents to serve in the House of Representatives, to go back to their country. What? They're from America. They're U.S. citizens. They're serving in these positions of honor and public trust. I know what that means, because when I couple it with him describing Klansmen and neo-Nazis and white supremacists as very fine people, when someone at one of his rallies yells out, "Shoot them," when he asks what we do about this invasion of immigrants, and the crowd laughs and the president smiles, and he directs that hatred and that violence at my hometown of El Paso, at anyone based on their country of origin, based on their ethnicity, based on their immigration status, who does not look like the majority in this country. That's the fear that he wants us to feel. So we have to make this commitment to one another that we are going to be unafraid. We're going to be fearless in the pursuit of our ambitions, of our aspirations, of what we know this country to be capable of doing, and that we're going to do it together. Democrats, for sure, but Republicans, those of you who are here, I want you to know you're in the right place. Independents, we cannot do this without you. Before you're any of those things, you're an American first, and we're going to treat one another accordingly. We're going to do the things we know that we are capable of doing. That's why I'm running to serve you as president. That's the way that we're running this campaign. And that's why I'm looking forward both to having the chance to listen to you and learn from you and answer your questions and to hear what's on your mind, but also to ask for your help. This is really tough, and it's going to take all of us. And if you have any interest in being part of this campaign, of supporting my candidacy, I want you to sign up before this meeting is over. And we've got forms that you can sign up on, or you can go to the website, BetoO'Rourke.com. But this is the moment of truth for this campaign and for this country. And we're going to need every single person doing everything that they can if we're going to be successful. So thank you all for coming out. We're going to turn the microphone over to you. Cynthia Cano's got it. Thank you all. Huge honor to be here. You did good. Okay, you got it. Thank you.
Buenas tardes, Beto.
Buenas tardes.
How are you doing? I have a question for you regarding immigration. I'm actually new to Nevada. I'm a teacher here now. And I've seen...
Go teachers.
I've seen firsthand what these immigration policies have done to my students, and I see it in me. I see how ICE is terrorizing our communities here in North Las Vegas. I work in East Las Vegas. I've seen it firsthand, and I'm a former DACA recipient myself, so this hits close to home. My question to you, Beto, is in the first 100 days as president, what do you plan to do to relieve the families from the terror felt by ICE presence? What will happen to the future of DACA recipients? and dreamers who didn't qualify for DACA, because not everybody qualified for DACA, and our parents that are either currently in detention centers or in fear of being in a detention center. And looking to the future, in your opinion, what does comprehensive immigration reform look like?
Wow. Great questions. Thank you. I also want to thank you, and I heard a couple of applause when you introduced yourself, for your public service as a public educator. So important, one of the toughest jobs in America today. You're not paid enough, you're not respected enough. You might have taken on student loan debt for the privilege of teaching other people's children, and then you have to fear the possibility, a very real one, that because we have not passed gun sense legislation, that someone's going to walk into a classroom with a firearm, and for those kids for whom you've already sacrificed so much, you have to worry about the worst possible situation and the ultimate sacrifice that you might have to make. So I'm grateful on all counts. So day one, every single child who is being detained by this country, and you need to know this, we have the largest mass incarceration of children in America who've committed no crime whatsoever since perhaps the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. These are kids in Border Patrol stations. These are kids at Southwest Key. These are kids who were in detention centers in Florida and all over the country. Many separated from their parents, knowing not when or if they're ever going to see them again. Every single one of them liberated, reunited with their families, and then we invest in the long-term care for kids who have experienced extraordinary torture, because that's what it is, and trauma that it's going to be very hard for them to overcome without some professional help. Two, we're going to hold accountable everyone who's responsible for that family separation policy, for the caging of kids, and for the fact, as you probably know, we've lost the lives of 7 children in our custody and care. And they showed up here after 2,000 miles on the road, on foot, atop a train known as La Bestia, as vulnerable, as defenseless, as a human can be. And the way that this country of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees, the wealthiest country on the face of the planet, welcomed them was to take them from their parents and to put them in cages and to lose the lives of 7 of them so far. That's all that we know. Could be more. This administration is not telling, and it's really thanks to the press that we've learned about some of these deaths that we are all, by the way, at the end of the day, responsible for as long as this persists. 3, we never again arrest anyone coming to this country seeking asylum or refuge or shelter. We make sure that we welcome them. If they have no other home, they will find a home here in this country. And it will be good for them. It'll be great for us. The genius that they will reveal over the course of their life will be to our benefit here in the United States of America. You asked about deportations. We were just in Forest and in Canton, Mississippi. That state was a site of the largest ICE raid in the history of this country. ICE raids internal in the U.S. are up tenfold under this administration, striking terror into the hearts of those who are subject to those raids and the communities in which they live, and frankly, every immigrant community in America, because we don't know where they will strike next. So we're going to end internal enforcement raids for those who pose no threat, are not violent, are raising U.S. citizen children in many cases, and should be afforded the opportunity to remain here legally, to continue to work and contribute even more to our success. Dreamers, you asked about, make them not only legal, not only free them from fear, but make them U.S. citizens so they can rise to their highest and best potential right here in this country. And then lastly, you asked about what does comprehensive immigration law look like under an Rourke administration. In addition to everything that we've just described, the 9 million legal permanent resident green card holders in America, we're going to waive their citizenship fees, expedite the process for them to become U.S. citizens so they are fully participating. Anyone who wants to come to this country, to join family, to go to school, to work a job, to flee persecution or violence, there's going to be a safe, quick, orderly path to come to this country. We're going to raise the visa quotas that we have. We're going to prioritize family reunification, and we're going to make sure that we live up to our values and the best traditions of this country of immigrants. Thank you for asking the question. Really appreciate it.
Hi, Beto. How are you?
There you are.
Yeah. My name is Andy. Happy belated birthday.
Thank you very much.
First, I want to say that it's really refreshing to have somebody like you in politics. I think your authenticity and capacity to listen to other people is extraordinary and admirable. I don't have so much a question as much as I need your mentorship on something. I'm from Argentina, and I became a citizen in 2016. And in my home country, thank you, politics has gotten so polarized that in Argentina now, many family members no longer speak to each other because of different political beliefs. And it seems to me that this country is headed in that direction. I'm seeing more and more polarization. And obviously, regardless of what happens, this country has to heal immensely. And there's times when I think about that, and the thought that I go to is, well, I have these beliefs and other people have different ones, but at the end of the day, we all want a better country, and that kind of gets me through the day. But then I realize that to some people, a better country is stripping away the rights of LGBT people. As a gay man, that bothers me. Or it has to do with, as you were saying, sending people back to their countries. And so I'm wondering, how do we heal when some people's idea of a utopian country is ultimately about hatred and discrimination and not valuing other people?
That's such a good question. The way that I try to approach it, just in my life as a candidate, when I served in office, is to always seek out that common ground. If I can't get to perfect, is there something better than what I have right now that we can achieve? And how do I listen to you and gain your perspective on this to understand where you're coming from, to find that common ground so that we can work to the common good? Serving as a Democrat in a Republican-controlled House for 6 years, that was essential if I was going to get anything done. And we were pretty successful around improving mental health care access for veterans, or protecting public lands, or working on U.S.-Mexico border issues. In Texas last year, though we didn't win, we won more votes than any Democrat had, but we also won independence for the first time in decades, and nearly 500,000 Republicans who voted for a Republican for governor also voted for us for U.S. Senate. And it didn't require us to trim our sails or to curb the power of our convictions. We just had to show up everywhere and bring everyone in, and then talk about these issues. Not only talk about gun violence, but talk about the fact that in Texas, perfectly legal, though it's not okay to fire someone based on their sexual orientation. In Texas, though there are 30,000 kids in the foster care system, you can by law be too gay to adopt one of them. And I would say that out loud. It didn't matter the community I was in, because I want everyone to understand what is being done in their name. And maybe no one has said that out loud from a position of public trust or from a position of seeking an office. And I think, perhaps in some way, maybe that moved things in Texas. On this issue of mandatory buybacks of AR-15s, in Texas right now, it is 49% approve of a mandatory buyback, only 36% opposed, and that is in a proud but responsible, gun-owning, thought to be too red to believe it state, and that is happening right now. So having a little faith in our fellow Americans, giving them a chance to do the right thing, but then to the kicker of your question, if they fail to, calling that out. It is not okay to be chanting "Send her back" at that rally in North Carolina. You are complicit in the racism that frankly is foundational and fundamental to this country, but that the president has brought out into the open, that is killing people in this country right now. That guy who yelled out "shoot them" at the rally in Florida, and the crowd that roared in laughter, they're part of this problem. And I cannot be blinded by a pursuit of bipartisanship just to pretend that everything is okay. If we do that, we're screwed, because the problems that we have, though they have been manifest in Donald Trump and exacerbated during his administration, and he's just the worst president we've ever had. And talking about division, he is preaching civil war right now, arresting members of Congress for treason, whistleblowers and members of law enforcement describing them as spies and saying, remember what we used to do them in the good old days, which is kill them. So look, we've got our work cut out for us. But we also have this opportunity to address the fundamental issues that produce that. You know, some have made the case, very compelling for me, that you mark the start of this country and the start of this project and experiment, not at the 4th of July, 1776, but August 20th, 1619, the first time someone was kidnapped from West Africa and brought here against their will, forced to build this country. We've never reckoned with that. And not just slavery, but segregation and suppression and Jim Crow and everything that is alive and well today that has produced such marked outcomes that are different for Black America and white America, or the xenophobia and racism, or the homophobia that is manifest in President Trump tweeting out that transgender service members will no longer be allowed to serve their country. That sends an unambiguous signal about who is valuable in this country and who is not. And yet that is also a reflection of how many people in America feel right now. So you asking this question, my response to it, our willingness to continue to talk about this, but always leave the door open to invite people in to join us in the conversation. I think that is so important to get to the goal that you described, which is healing a very polarized, a very divided country. But let's heal it without papering over the differences or turning a blind eye to what is underneath that has been seething there for a very long time. That's also an opportunity for us as well. So anyhow, great question. Thank you for asking it. Appreciate that. Thanks. Hey there.
Thank you for being here and talking to us today. I hope you don't mind I wrote down the question.
That's great.
My name is Yasmin. I'm an ACLU Rights for All voter. I was born and raised in Las Vegas, and I'm a member of our thriving Muslim community here in the city. On day one as president, will you commit to rescinding every order related to the Muslim ban and to call the Muslim ban what it is, not a quote unquote travel ban, but a Muslim ban that causes real harm to people?
Yes. Thank you, Yasmin. So we were making this case earlier that Trump doesn't just offend our sensibilities when he talks about Muslims being dangerous or defective or dysfunctional, and so we have to ban them all from coming to this country. It really changes this country, and you may know this, but the mosque in Victoria, Texas was burned to the ground within 24 hours of his quote-unquote travel ban, which is in reality a Muslim ban, something that he promised, and he said it in explicit terms as a candidate. I will ban all Muslims from coming to this country. It is hard for me, and if you have a better example, give it to me, to find something that is a better example than the Third Reich and describing all people of one religion as inherently defective or dysfunctional, to be treated differently than other people of other religions in a given state or country. And no analogy is perfect, and that's one that you're never supposed to employ, and yet I think we have to call it out for what it is. So yes, not only will we rescind that, but I think we must speak with pride and celebrate our differences, which are not disqualifying, which are not dangerous. They're foundational to our strength, our success, and yes, our safety and our security, which is the case that I make for El Paso, one of the safest cities in America today. So thank you for being here, for asking the question. The answer is yes. Thanks. Really good.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for coming out to Vegas again to see us.
Of course.
My question, I'm not a political major whatsoever, but I'm a journalism and video production major. But I have followed and I've worked in political realms for a few years. And so what my question for you just is, basically what inspired you to become a public servant? What was that motivation for yourself to want to lead a community?
Thanks for the question. I never thought I wanted to do this. In fact, my dad was in politics. He was a county commissioner and a county judge in El Paso, and I wanted no part of it. You know, I wanted to, in some ways, be my own man, be my own person. And then I also was just incredibly and painfully shy, and just had a really hard time doing anything in any kind of public way. But it's interesting, your interests and your pursuits right now were in some ways mine when I was much younger. When I moved back to Texas in 1998, I started an online newspaper. I was just really fascinated by what was going on in El Paso, in our sister city of Ciudad Juarez, and I wanted to share that with the rest of the world. I didn't feel like our story was being told, and I wanted to help tell it. And the more that we covered City Hall or arts and culture or just life in our border community, the more interested I became in trying to have some larger impact on the direction that we took. And from that and my exposure to what was happening in public policy in El Paso, I decided to run for city council. And really just knocked on doors. I had conversations like the one that we're having right here, and learned a really important lesson, which was to listen to people so that they could help me to understand what the issues were that were most important to them. And I remember that first campaign. You may know the Wrestler Canyon part of El Paso on the west side, but that was part of the city council district that I wanted to represent. And it was my first day on the trail, the first doors I was knocking on, and first person answers their door, and I say, hey, I'm Beto Rourke, and I'm running to serve you as the District 8 city councilman, and I want to keep your taxes down, and I want to make sure the park is green, and all this stuff. And the person who answered the door, the woman, interrupts me, and she says, that's great, but what concerns us is this arroyo behind our house, Wrestler Canyon, is about to be developed. And all this wildlife and the water that flows through here after a big rain, all that's going to be lost to us. And this really special part of El Paso will be gone forever. So I want you to fight to protect Wrestler Canyon. I said, okay, got it. Next house I go to, I give the same pitch. And the next person says, you know, my most urgent issue is Wrestler Canyon. I want you to save it. So the third door I knock on, person answers, and I say, I'm Beto O'Rourke, and I'm here to save Wrestler Canyon. And you know what? We won that election. So, what's that? And we saved Wrestler Canyon. Yeah, that's the big thing. Next time you're in El Paso, come out to Wrestler Canyon. And so that's there you go. You've been there. That's the most important lesson. And literally every single race I've ever run since then has been based on going door to door or community to community and always having the chance to listen to people. And very often, and it's been true I think for almost everyone who's asked a question today, you have the solutions to the questions that you've asked. You know, the answer is yes to your question about reversing the Muslim ban. I mean, you have a vision for immigration reform. So hearing those solutions is so helpful to me and gives me what I need to be able to describe a vision for this country that others can buy into and vote for. So thanks for asking the question. Really appreciate that. Walk down memory lane. Yeah.
Right here, Beto. This is going to be our last question.
Okay.
Hey, Beto, thanks for coming out. Of course. I'm finally getting warm. Let me take my coat off. So, my question's about immigration and guns and stuff. So, with immigration, we have a visa of $1 million a year, which is good because we have better people and stuff. You said you want to raise that, but I don't understand why you don't raise it, because you want to tear down the wall altogether and let everybody in, right? So my other question is, if you take the AR-15s away, good idea, from registered owners who registered it, so you know who has them. You can go take them from the registered legal owners, but the non-registered ones who have them illegal still get to keep theirs. And when you open the border up, without vetting people come in, that brings guns in too. So you don't see any problem with that at all, from taking guns away from all the legal or registered gun owners and letting more guns in, and illegal people have guns still.
Yeah, so appreciate you being here, and get the point with your shirt. A couple things. There you go. So a couple things. One, I mentioned earlier a safe, legal, quick, orderly path to come to this country, to join family or to work a job or to flee persecution. That doesn't mean crossing in between ports of entry. It doesn't mean undocumented crossings into this country. So that is not something that I want or that I would advocate for. Second, but here, I'll let you talk. I heard you out. Second, this idea, which maybe is you have the wrong impression, don't have the right facts, but is not true, that people from Mexico or Latin America are bringing guns to this country. Is actually the guns that are manufactured and sold here that are being sent south, that are killing people in record numbers in that country. And then this implication that may be raised in your question, and certainly has been said explicitly by the president, that we need these guns to defend ourselves against those who come from other countries, who he describes as killers and predators. And you saw this story today that he talked openly about shooting immigrants in the legs. Like, if we can't kill them outright, can we shoot them in the legs and slow them down? I don't. That's not my country. I don't want that to become my country. And you know, on this issue of AR-15s and AK-47s, I think we can respectfully disagree. And you know, you may have a really good case to make for why someone should have and be able to continue to use a weapon of war, which you don't need to hunt. You don't need to defend yourself in your home. You really only need to kill people. That's what it was designed to do. I believe, and a majority of Americans believe, that we should stop selling them and that we should buy them back. And members of the NRA have approached me, Republicans have approached me and said, I own an AR-15, you're right on this one. And I would willingly give that up if it's going to save lives. So I wanted to correct an impression that you might have left about my positions on this or some of the facts on the issue. But I appreciate the fact that you're here and you know, grateful that you came out. Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Okay, es todo. All right. Thank you all for coming out. We're going to hang out for a little bit and have a chance to say hello to folks or take a picture if you'd like to. Thanks to all of our volunteers and supporters and friends for coming out. We're grateful. Gracias.